My name is Nerdy, and this is my What If It's Us book talk. So in this video, I'm going to be doing two sections, a non-spoiler and a spoiler section. So first, I'm going to give you a synopsis of the book and my non-spoiler thoughts about the book, and then I'll just go into specific details about the book and talk about different events that I thought were particularly funny, well-written, etc. What If It's Us is a book by Becky Albertalli and Silvera that came out this past Tuesday, October the 9th. This book follows two main protagonists, Arthur and Ben. Arthur is in New York City for the summer, and Ben is a resident of the city. One day, they have a chance meeting at a post office, which is their meet cute. From there, they try multiple ways of finding each other. It's a hilarious and well-written romance by two amazing authors that I highly recommend. I, of course, gave this book 5 stars. Like I said, they're very amazing authors, very talented. It's a very funny, well-written, great book. I think they did a really great job writing the relationship, not only between the two protagonists, but also between the other characters, and they handled the conflict really well. Overall, it was just really, really great. That is pretty much all I can say without any spoilers. If you haven't read this book, or if you haven't read any books by these authors, I highly recommend them. They are really, really great books, and this one in particular is definitely one of my favorites. So go and read it, come back, come join the discussion once you've read it. Okay, now it's time for the spoiler section of the video. So for the spoiler section, I'm going to start by going through the main romance, and then I'm going to talk about the friends and family of the protagonists and organize it that way, so I can try to hit all of the points. So before I started reading the book, I was instantly worried because thus far all of Silvera's books have been sad. So I was very concerned that I was going to get very invested in a very cute romance and then be extremely let down. Fortunately, that was not the case for this book. It all went very well. So I'm going to start from the very beginning of the book with their meet cute. Something I really enjoyed about this book right off the bat was the voices of the characters. So you see from both protagonists' point of views, it goes back and forth between Arthur's point of view and Ben's point of view. I just really loved the way they described things, and Arthur had hilarious humor, and I found both of these main characters to be somewhat relatable because Arthur kind of has my awkwardness, and I really appreciated seeing that because I think some of his actions and things he said would be similar to me in that situation because I'm just awkward and never have any idea what to do in any sort of social situation. Both of them made constant nerd references, which I really appreciated, and had really great humor. But Ben is also writing a novel, which I am doing as well, so I was just relating to these characters throughout the entire book, which I really enjoyed, because it's always more enjoyable for me to be able to relate to the characters in some way. And like I said, something I loved about the meet cute was just how awkward it was. It wasn't, they're instantly falling in love with each other and stuff like that. It was just very awkward, and they were like, oh, this person's cute, and it kind of went from there. After that, Arthur starts trying to find Ben, knowing little to nothing about him. They discuss trying to find him on Craigslist, and he eventually puts up the poster in the Dream and Bean coffee house because he, I think, was wearing a Dream and Bean shirt. Something I liked about this book that I noticed when I read Silvera's book, They Both Die at the End, was there was a lot of coincidences and things that kind of were interwoven and came back around. One of the things was that Arthur was going to post something on Craigslist, and then Ben ended up checking Craigslist because his dad happened to mention something about it, but then Arthur's mom said he wasn't allowed to, so there was nothing there, and there was some stuff like that went back and forth and kind of had coincidences, and they almost found each other, but then they didn't, and eventually Ben sees the poster in the coffee shop and finds him. Something that really bothered me about that, though, was the fact that Arthur just put his email on the poster. I hope that wasn't his private email, because you would get so much spam and so many weird people emailing you. That's concerning. So after they finally find each other and meet up and start trying to figure out what to do, and it's really awkward, they have a few different first dates. This was something I really liked, that they kept doing do-overs, and something I was really enjoying because, again, it wasn't it was a perfect first date like you see in some romances. It was awkward, it was weird. In the first 2 first dates, one of them had a bad time. The first time, Arthur didn't really like arcades, which I don't understand. And then the second time, Ben didn't really like the fancy sit down and talk restaurant. And finally they found something that worked, and it was awkward all the way through, which I really enjoyed. Something else I enjoyed seeing was their very quick makeup after the Hamilton incident. Toward the middle of the book, Ben is taking Arthur on kind of a surprise date and not really telling him what they're doing. So it turns out he was entered to win Hamilton tickets, and they get there and he had won, but they didn't get there fast enough. Personally, if it was me, I think at that point I would have just lost it. Like, losing front row Hamilton tickets is awful. Like, you need to be on time for that. And I was like yelling at Ben, like, why would you, like, I get that he's late sometimes, and that's something about his character, that he's either, like, he's just almost always late. And that's fine in a normal scenario if the people you're meeting with knows that. But if there are Hamilton tickets on the line, you don't mess with that. Like, you get moving. But I did like that after the fact, even though Arthur was rightfully furious and just really upset and mad at Ben, they quickly made up by sitting on the sidewalk and just listening to different Broadway songs and passing them back and forth. And Arthur finally said that that was better than seeing Hamilton, which, debatable. But I just thought that was such a cute moment, and I liked how quickly they were able to make up, and that wasn't like the major conflict, because even though I understand why somebody would be mad about that, and I personally would definitely be mad about that, it's definitely not something to create a huge conflict over. But at the end of that, it also meant I was waiting for that major conflict. Because in every romance, there is usually a major conflict that breaks them up for a while or creates some kind of problem between them that ultimately needs to be solved for it to work out. I had a feeling that that major conflict was going to be Hudson related. So at the beginning of the book, the reason Arthur and Ben meet is because Ben is going to the post office to send his ex-boyfriend some of his things back, and that ex-boyfriend is Hudson. Now, the reason I thought this was probably going to be the major conflict is because, with any recent ex, there's usually some sort of unresolved feelings, especially considering that they broke up because Hudson cheated, not because they fell out of love or anything like that. So there's bound to be some unresolved feelings there. And the fact that Ben is seeing Hudson every weekday during summer school, that's bound to create some sort of problem, especially the fact that Arthur doesn't know about it and is clearly jealous of that ex-boyfriend. Lo and behold, one day Arthur comes to the school and surprises Ben, which I think is so sweet, that he like does these little surprises, and Hudson is right there and comes running up, and Arthur immediately recognizes him and is furious. And that was the major conflict, and he ends up breaking up with Ben and saying he doesn't want to see him and goes home to spend his birthday alone. One of the next big events was when Ben and Hudson met up at I think it was a diner or a cafe or something, and they were sitting next to each other at a counter, and they were just talking, and he was talking about Arthur, and then Hudson tries to kiss him, and I totally saw that coming. Like, I called it. I knew Hudson would have unresolved feelings, and that would be a problem in the story with the romance, was Hudson like interfering and doing something. Like, it was bound to happen. I'm just so happy that Ben like immediately rejected it and was like over him, at least as much as you can be over someone in that short amount of time, and clearly did not want to be with him anymore and was just so distraught over what he had done to Arthur and how he had like kept that from him and wanting to fix that. During this time, Arthur and Ben were both pushing away their friends as well, which was something that bothered me a little bit, because just because something's bad has happened to you doesn't mean you can suddenly say everything you've been thinking about your friends. Like, that doesn't give you excuse to just say whatever you want. And I liked that Ben's friend Dylan just wasn't taking any of that. But during this time at the diner, cafe, something, Ben gets a call that Dylan is in the hospital. So throughout the book, you know that Dylan has a heart condition, and so immediately Ben is like, you know, he might be dying, I have to get down there. And they're in the middle of a fight at this point. He goes to the hospital, he's like texting Arthur, like, I know you don't want to talk to me, but here's what's going on. And Arthur's like right there helping him and talking to him, which I thought was so sweet, that despite the circumstances, he, you know, came back to still help. And I think that's a great thing to be able to do that, even if you're totally mad at somebody, to still be there for them. And that's the sign of a good relationship, that even if you're mad at someone, you're still willing to like help them when they need it. So he gets to the hospital, and it turns out to be a false alarm. Ben goes to leave with Dylan's permission to go make up with Arthur, and he's standing in the lobby. And that was just the sweetest moment. I was just awing so much when I saw that. I thought that was such a sweet thing, and I kind of thought that might happen, but since they were like texting, I was like, oh, maybe he's just waiting to see what happens. And he's just like, turn around, walk a few feet, like, I'm right here. And I thought that was so amazing of him to just come down there despite everything to see if everything's okay. After that, they're able to make up, and it's really just cute from then on, but you also have this countdown to when Arthur is leaving to go back to Georgia. On one of their last days together, instead of like having some big thing, they end up just studying to help Ben move on to his final year of high school, and he uses all these really great mnemonic devices. The one written in the text is fantastic. And I love that Arthur was able to get past his like jealousy of Hudson and able to say, like, you know, go be friends with him. It'll be okay. Maybe we can all hang out. Like, I understand you wanting to still be friends, and he'll kind of joke about it and stuff. And I thought that was really great that he was able to move past that. Because I know I've seen other fictional relationships before where something happens like with an ex where like they weren't necessarily telling the truth about it, and that meant like the end and it couldn't be made up, or if they got back together it was like, you can't ever see this person. And I love that he never gave that ultimatum and ended up being able to be okay with it. I thought that was really, really great. And my favorite part of the book was this last day where Ben organizes this big thing for Arthur, that Arthur's kind of been the one to do this sort of thing, and finally Ben is turning it around and making this scavenger hunt type thing that leads Arthur back through their time together. So it took him to the post office where they first met. It took him to work. It took him to, I think, the karaoke place that they went to. And at that karaoke place are the twins from the beginning of the story that they noticed outside, and that's kind of how they noticed each other, where they were like just looking at these twins with handlebar mustaches, and I think they were wearing rompers, I'm not really sure. And this, I think, was my favorite part of the book because those twins turned out to be Namrata's boyfriend's roommates, turned out to be those twins with the mustaches, and the whole time there was that connection, and that's something I really loved about that. And like I said, I saw that in They Both Die at the End as well, and that's something I really loved about that book, so I was really excited to see that happening in this book as well. And finally, there is the epilogue. So the epilogue skips forward about a year. So Arthur is going to school at Wesleyan, and Ben, I think, is going to college in New York. They're still friends, they still communicate. They ended up breaking up and staying friends and communicating that way instead of trying to do long distance, because they figured this would be better for their relationship. And I really liked that. I liked that they kind of became friends and said this will end up working better, and one day maybe you can come back and we can get back together again. And there was kind of that note of, you know, we could get back together, or maybe we're just supposed to be friends. And I liked that because it seemed more realistic than they would have this long distance relationship and it would completely work out and they would stay together, because that's just not realistic. Sometimes that works, and I'm sure it has worked for some people, but it's more likely that it won't work. I usually don't like endings like that where it's like, oh, we'll just be friends and maybe that'll happen, and it's really like, you decide. Like, I usually hate that kind of ending, but I think they really pulled it off, and I think it really, really worked with this story, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought that was a really great ending. So now for the rest of the video, I'd like to get into the relationships between Arthur, Ben, and all of their friends and family members. These sections are going to be a little shorter. I'm just going to go through kind of my favorite points and talk about the characters a little bit and what I liked about them and their relationships, because that was definitely a really great part about this, was that the relationships between all the characters were so strong, and it wasn't like some books where there's like side characters and you see them every now and then. Like, you felt those relationships as strongly as you felt the main characters' relationships, and that was really amazing. So I'm going to start with probably my favorite character in the novel, which is Ben's best friend, Dylan. So I loved Dylan. He had great humor. It was like funny, sometimes inappropriate humor. He was really great. I loved that his relationship with Ben was unaffected by the fact that he was straight and Ben was gay, and that they were like constantly flirting. And Dylan's girlfriend in the book, Samantha, was constantly like asking, you know, do I have something to worry about here, like jokingly. There was constant jokes about Dylan and Ben, and I think that worked really well, and I loved seeing that they were so close. And I just loved, like, when he and Ben had a fight, how quickly they made up after his incident where he was in the hospital and he just immediately forgave him, and I just loved their dynamic throughout the whole book and how like he was like protective of Ben and kind of rooting for Arthur and trying to help him figure everything out and was there for him. He was definitely one of the best parts of the book, and he contributed to a lot of the humor in the book. Dylan's girlfriend throughout the book, Samantha, was also a great part of this book. She was at the beginning trying to help Ben locate Arthur and figure him out and do all this detective skills on the internet. I also loved that something between her and Dylan was at one point he accidentally said "my future wife," and it freaked her out a little bit. But then after Dylan's incident, they're in the hospital and she says "future husband," and I thought that was so cute, and I did really like that they were still together by the end of the book, whereas everyone else had kind of gone their separate ways. You know, they still were together and still going strong, and I really, really liked their relationship, and I thought it worked really well, and it was just a really nice relationship to see. So then you have Arthur's friends from Georgia, Jesse and Ethan. So I did not like these characters at the beginning of the book. I really didn't like them until they came to New York and you got to see a little more of their characters, but just from the FaceTime calls and the awkwardness there, I really didn't like them. Like, I felt like there was definitely something wrong there, and I never thought it was like an issue with Ethan having an issue with Arthur being gay. Like, I never thought that was the case, but there was definitely something wrong, like, that you could see from the beginning. There was something just a little off with them. And I thought it was, like, I didn't even think that the reason that was off was because Jesse and Ethan were dating. Like, I definitely could tell from the beginning, or close to the beginning, that they were together, and that was something they tried to tell him. But I didn't think that would be a reason for Ethan, like, having distance between him and Arthur. So I thought that was a little surprising that that would cause so much distance between them to the point where he would just ignore text messages from Arthur. And I thought that was kind of weird and kind of a mean thing to do to one of your friends, just kind of completely stop talking to them beyond like a group setting just because you're nervous to tell them something. And it wasn't like it just suddenly stopped for a week or a few days or something. It was like months that this had been going on, and I was just really surprised that that would be a reason to just suddenly make a huge change in your relationship with someone. That being said, I did really like once they came to New York and they were able to make up and kind of talk about what had been going on after Arthur had kind of calmed down a little bit and wasn't so like worked up about him and Ben and everything going on, and they were able to really talk about it, and I started to really like Jesse and Ethan. I also liked how at the end in the epilogue they had broken up, just again because that's realistic, that not all relationships are going to work out, and sometimes people just go their separate ways and it'll be awkward, we kind of have to deal with it, and then that brings in the case of like friends dating and what you do when friends break up. I liked that that was part of the book, and it wasn't just like, oh, everyone's together and everything's great and, you know, no one's ever gonna break up, because that's just not realistic. A smaller component of this book was Arthur's New York friends, Namrata and Juliet. They worked in the law office that he was interning at, and they were just a really funny part of the book that you get to see every now and then. They as well had great humor. I liked their relationship with Arthur. It kind of showed what it's like at the beginning of a friendship, where you don't really know much about each other, but you kind of want to learn, and like he was awkward, and that's how I feel when I meet new people. It's like, I want to be your friend, but I can't tell if you like me. Like, that's definitely how I am when I meet new people. So I was also relating to his awkwardness in that situation as well. I loved how at the end of the book, when they came to see him on his birthday, they wouldn't let him drink, and they were like kept making jokes that they were going to get fired for like letting Arthur do certain things, and I thought they were a great component to the story as well. So I've talked a little bit about Hudson already when going through Arthur and Ben's relationship, but I just did want to mention a couple of things about him as well. Like I said earlier, I definitely thought he was going to be the source of the major conflict in the story, and I definitely saw that he would have some unresolved feelings with Ben just because Ben was the one to end the relationship, and he had already thought the relationship was over, which is no excuse. Definitely check in with somebody before you just assume that it's over. Like, doesn't hurt to ask. Could hurt, or it could. Depends on the person, I guess, but I think he definitely should have like said something before he just went off and dealt with his feelings in his own way. Alright, the last thing about this book that I want to talk about is the relationship between the protagonists, Ben and Arthur, and their parents. This is something I liked as well. I liked the mention of Ben's parents and how they were religious but still really open-minded. And I liked that that was brought up because I think that's something that people have started to make an association between being religious and being like closed-minded or homophobic, and that's not always true. And I think it was really nice that they stated that and said like not all religious people are going by every word in the Bible. And I think it was a line that said something like, not everyone goes by every word in the Bible except when it's different than the hate they're trying to say and spew out. And I thought that was a really great thing to say and show that you can be religious without being closed-minded and that it's not the same thing. I also liked with both sets of parents how involved they were with their kids, and especially with Arthur's dad, how he was just very involved with Arthur and Ben and constantly asking him and trying to help him, and immediately was like, let's get on Craigslist and post an ad. And then the mom was like, hold on, that's not safe. Like, I thought that whole relationship was great with all the parents. And something with Arthur's parents as well, I liked that they weren't actually kind of heading for a divorce, that's just kind of how they were. And I liked that they show that some couples just bicker a lot, and that's just how some couples work. Like, not everyone's going to be a perfect couple that never argues. Overall, I just think this book was a really great blend of humor and kind of more serious conflict moments. And I liked that they showed a lot of conflict between different people and just had a realistic ending, or realistic-ish, to kind of show that stuff happens, you can get through it, not everything is going to be perfect, not every relationship is going to work perfectly, there are going to be awkward moments, there are going to be conflicts, but it doesn't always mean the end of something. I thought that was a really, really great theme throughout the book and something I really enjoyed about it. Overall, I definitely recommend this book. If you read this book, hopefully you've read it if you've made it this far into the video and I haven't just told you every single moment of the book. Hopefully you've read the book. If you have, tell me in the comments down below what your favorite part was, or if I missed anything in this video that you wish I would have talked about, because I probably did. My social media links are in the description. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!